Society of American Magicians lecture series. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Joel Batman Zaritsky, and normally we would have John the Master Blaster Midgley, but he's actually working right now, saving lives, but he is still controlling things backstage actually at his work. But we do have our other tech whiz, Brett Soul. Hey, Brett, how's it going there today?
Going great, sir. I'm looking forward to another great lecture.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. Before we get to that, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has been coming out on Friday nights and watching us. We've been getting so many emails and letters saying how much they do appreciate these lectures. And I tell you, it means a lot to hear from you guys. So thank you so much. You know, one of the tenets of the SAM is to elevate the art of magic. And you being here allows us to do that together all over the world as a group. And that's why I'm so glad you're here with us. But let's get to tonight's lecturer. He's a trained filmmaker, a mime, an actor, a director, a magician, a comedian, and so much more. He has traveled worldwide providing theater that charms audiences with the actor's imagination, the mime's skill, and the conjurer's craft. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Leland Faulkner.
To my little world, welcome to our little window on the world. We all have our little windows, and I'm inviting you into mine, into my little world here. In my studio here, I've created a green screen. Oh, maybe I'm not being able to, I hope everyone can hear me. Everyone hears me?
Yeah, you sound good. You sound good.
Great. So the studio I have isn't very big. It's about 16 feet wide, but it has a nice tall ceiling. And so I've been able to put a green screen on the back and on the front and on the floor and make my own little world happen. Very magical. But I put it to the test 2 days ago for the first time doing a Zoom cast performance for a private boys' school. It had been canceled because of the pandemic, and then they rebooked it. And now here we are in this new venue. And I did it for the first time, and I'm pleased to say it went really, really well. And I hope to do many more of them after this. But still, there's something we all miss about that live interaction, that the immediacy of live theater. I worked in the film and television industry for a long time, 7 years out in California. And one of the reasons I came back to the East Coast is because I had a theater agent here who could book me into live shows because I missed that immediacy. So I know what that magic is all about. And now we have to learn how to do a little bit a new kind of performance technique and style, being able to use this frame as much as possible. And one of the nice things about this frame and this room that I have right here is I can actually get a pretty good amount of depth. If you can see here, I have quite a bit of room. I can step all the way back and get my full body into the screen and the frame. So now I have room to move and play and gesture and work, and it feels more and more like a real performance because I can use my whole body. And we'll talk a lot about that as the lecture goes on, because I was trained first as a mime artist. My teacher, his name was Tony Montanaro, and I first started studying with him when I was 17 years old. I became his apprentice and ended up touring with him, and it was because of him I was able to develop my hand shadow act. He allowed me to start doing shadows in the pre-show for his own shows that he was already touring professionally. And Tony had been on Broadway, and we were doing international festivals, and he let me do my little act as the warm-up. And eventually it became a little signature piece for me that I have done in almost every performance that I've given. But 2 days ago, performing for this private school, I tell you one thing, I don't know if I was as nervous performing for 4,000 people in a Russian circus as I was performing for 30 12-year-old boys on Zoom. Anyway, without further ado, what I'd like to do is have Joel put up my hand shadow act for you to see and take a look at that. And then we'll chat about it, and I'll give you a chance to learn how to do some shadows yourselves and some of the techniques that we might want to incorporate for other kinds of productions and things. So, Joel, would you take it away? And there you have it, the hand shadow act. Now, the hands have to be trained to a certain degree. You have to be able to move. And the movement isn't really limited to your hands. Your whole body is in action while you do the hand shadow act. Let me show you the simple, classic hand shadow that everybody does when they're a kid. But I'll show you how complicated it actually is. So we'll start here. You take your hand, you cross your wrists, cross your thumbs. You put your hands slightly above your shoulder, like this. And this gives you this bird, the wings of the bird. But it's not just going like this. You have to have this wave, this ability to get this kind of movement into your hand to make it look like an actual bird. Now, if you look at a real bird when they're flying, you realize they're pushing against the air. They're pushing, and that's what gives them lift. And when they want to turn, they push the air from under one wing to the other. Just like that. And that's what you do when you do the hand shadow. You want to get that sensation of the bird catching the air and lifting itself. And you want it to go from one side to the other, and you want that wave action. This wave action with fingers and hands. Not only can you make this wave go this direction, but in the opposite direction as well. And the way you get that movement into your hands, if you don't have the ability, is you make a ball like this with your fingers separated, and you put your heels of your hand together, and then you keep your fingertips still, and you push the palms of your hands down. So now you have this sort of open space between them. You flatten, curve the hand back, and repeat. And then eventually you take one hand away, and then you have this movement. This movement is useful for a lot of things. In fact, you find when you develop movements or skills that often they carry over into whole other areas of your career and your life. If you're a performer and you're creating things on stage and your body is moving and people are watching how you move, these things carry over. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. I do want to share with you another little video from a play. I spent about almost a year with two friends of mine at Virginia Commonwealth University creating a play based on shadows. And they hired me because of my hand shadow ability. And because I also had a few skills with shadow puppetry and shadow play in general. And I've always been fascinated with light. So we got together and we would just, I would just jam out these ideas, and I would create a whole bunch of ideas in a row, and we would cherry pick the best ones. And eventually we had accumulated enough to make a full evening performance. Now, I'm not going to have this whole evening performance play out for you, but I'd like to share with you just the first sketch from the play Shadow Play. And it was developed using not even a bright light like this, but flashlights, simple flashlights. And what we were able to find within those flashlights, just through research and development and a little stick-to-itivity, I thought was pretty remarkable and fun. So enjoy this little excerpt from Shadow Play. Joel, if you would, please, could you cue that up? And you can see that the flashlights, just the flashlights, were able to create this sense of wonder, this sense of mystery, which to me was very, very magical. And when you're sitting there in the darkened theater and the light is transforming in front of you, and you know it's being done by live actors manipulating these things in front of you, there is a sense of mystery and magic to it. And I have to say, I love that. And I loved working on that piece, and I hope to revisit it someday. There's a whole world in shadow and shadow play, and things that have yet to be discovered. And I hope that some of you are out there and you're going to jump in with some kind of a screen and try to make your own play of some kind. And I want to talk about that word, play. That is a really important word. I think of all of this as theater, as a play. And play, just like being a kid, and you know, when you pretend you're like doing this or you pretend you're doing that, and it's all happening up here, well, that's what it's all about. That's the name of the game. A lot of people ask me, how did I get started? And how did I get interested in magic per se? Well, I came into magic by a long road, and I left it for a long, long time and became a mime, and I was working and touring professionally as a mime artist. But many years prior, when I was a young boy, about 10 years old, I lived in the country of Tanzania, and I lived in the city called Dar es Salaam, has a big port harbor. And who happened to bring their yacht into that harbor? The famous magician, John Calvert. Now, people think that sometimes he made up all these stories about being this world famous adventurer and taking all these risks and sinking yachts and crashing airplanes. But I'm here to testify to the fact they're all true. And when I was a young boy, I saw his posters on the pillars in downtown Dar es Salaam, and I begged my dad to take me, and he did. And I saw him perform the buzzsaw act, cut off somebody's head, do his cigarettes, the whole 9 yards. And it left an indelible impression on me. And my mother too, because he took a severed head, threw it into the audience, and she caught it and threw it back. I mean, what a tattoo on the mind. And then an interesting thing happened. I had very little interest in magic after that, until I came to the States to live. And I was studying mime, and I had this desire to do things that weren't just invisible, you know. And I started to create a few little routines, like with aerial fishing and some other effects. And I was invited to perform at this event by a man named Ray Goulet. He had a magic shop in Watertown, Massachusetts, a fantastic magic shop with an incredible museum of collectibles attached to it, things that he'd collected all his life, beautiful things. And Ray asked me that question. He goes, "So who's the first magician you ever saw?" I said, "Oh, the first magician I ever saw was a little boy in Africa. His name was John Calvert." He goes, "John Calvert? John Calvert's a friend of mine. I've been on his yacht." Well, I had seen that yacht in Africa. He goes, "Yeah, we were on that yacht." And he told me all these stories about the yacht. And I said, "Wow, that's amazing. He's still performing, still around." And he goes, "Yeah, there's going to be a dinner for him in 2 weeks. You want to go?" Well, I had bookings. I canceled them. And And I went to this meeting, and it was a performance in a hotel ballroom for a bunch of magicians. And I was sitting there in the audience, and I thought to myself, how long ago was it that I had seen him? I was 10 years old. Must have been 40 years ago. I said to myself, he's got to be like 98. I said, ooh, this probably isn't going to be very good. It was amazing. John, the moment he walked out, had incredible charisma. His beautiful wife, Tammy, I mean, they looked great. And his magic was great. He did the cigarette act where he produced cigarette, and he looked the part of Clark Gable still in his 90s. Unbelievable. Well, in the second half of the program, Tammy came out and she points right at me and she goes, there he is, John, there he is. And John came out, they made me stand up. And he said, you see, gentlemen, this boy saw me when he was in Africa. It's all true. And after that, John and I were tight and fast friends. After this lecture, I'll be posting a performance that I gave to honor John on his 100th birthday in New York City. Roger Dreyer, who runs Phantasm, put this amazing festival of magic together for it. And I was able to perform John's very own buzzsaw illusion. And I'll be posting that online for those of you who've attended here. I'll have your emails and I'll let you know where it is. So that's a little bit of history of why I got into this whole business and what moved me about the place. Now there's another foundation I want to talk about a little bit deeper. And that's my training with Tony Montanaro, the mime. You all know this illusion. Well, somebody has to make this stuff up. Somebody has to make this happen. That somebody was Tony. Tony Montanaro invented the wall. He invented it while he was improvising in a studio with the famous Italian Commedia dell'arte actor, Carlo Mazzoni Clemente. They were improvising together, and Tony pretended he was in a barrel. And Carlo said, stop, do that again. He said, what do you mean? You mean this? He goes, yes, how are you doing that? I said, he said, I'm just imagining it's there. But you see, Tony had all this technique inside of him already, and it just came out in this beautiful illusion, which became the standard cliche movement for every mime that has ever lived. But when it first came out, it was so fresh, people stopped and their jaws dropped. Now we're all jaded. We've seen everything, we think. But there's a lot that we haven't discovered yet. There's a lot out there to be discovered, to be created by each one of us. That's part of the reason we're in this profession. It's one of the reasons why we do magic and do theater, why we love being on stage and acting and performing. And all of that performance is a metaphor. Performing is a metaphor for life. It's to give people perspective, and to, you do things for them. You do things for your audience because they can't do them. It's your job to do it for them. You're in service to your audience. And I think you really need to have that humble approach to your work. And I'm more and more convinced of it, especially when we've gone through this whole pandemic. And I don't know about you, but I felt like I'd lost my career. Maybe I would never, ever perform before a live audience again. But suddenly, out of the woodwork comes a little Zoomcast show, comes a little lecture from the SAM, and suddenly we're all connected again. And that is really a wonderful thing. Don't squander it, and don't let your ego take over. Allow yourself to be human. One of the things that I've enjoyed the most about this whole pandemic is the fact we get to see these amazing celebrities sitting at their dining room table, and their dining room table is just like yours. Isn't that wonderful? We're all human beings. And I think that sort of vulnerability, that humanity is what we all need to put into our performances a little bit. One of the things that I was hoping to share with you tonight, but I'm not able to, is the Japanese butterflies, but I have it in the PDF form for you. And I will be posting a video along with the Calvert video as time goes on over the next week. And I'll make that available to everybody to see. In that video, and also in the PDF lecture notes, there's an explanation of how to fold the butterfly. And let me show you how to do it here live right now, so that when you look at the notes and when you see the video, it'll make sense to you. It's very simple. It's not a square of paper. It's an oblong. It's 2 squares, essentially wide. The first fold for the butterfly is down the middle. You fold it in half. Then, once it's folded in half, you make a diagonal fold here and here. I'll just start from the beginning for you. It's a little pre-creased. You make a triangle. You open the triangle up and you fold that part back. Now, you open up the paper and you bring that crease to the middle. And this crease, you do the same. Then, here and here, you fold it in half one more time, and now you're almost at the end. There's just 2 creases to make the head of the butterfly, one here, and one here. Now, by putting your finger here on the inside of the wing, you press on the back and open it up, and you have a nice semblant shape of a butterfly. Now, this, I think you can find in some of the dollar bill folds that they have, but it's a very simple butterfly. But what's nice about it is in the performance, you can open it up, right? And that's important because these days are probably over because you can't have any audience participation, but I would have a child catch the butterfly after it had been fanned, and I'd take it from them. And I would look at them. And as I did, I'd make a tiny rip. They wouldn't know it. I'd see the rip. So it was like a statement about the fragility of the butterfly. Now, here's the thing. There's no thumb tip to this. There's no thumb tip at all. There is a fingertip. People are so used to thumb tips. When you use a fingertip, it's a little more deceptive. And The handling is all laid out. You just saw it. So it's like this. The fingers are separated. The pieces stick. And because you have a fingertip here, it's invisible. Brought here, the piece is added to the back. The replacement is put back in, and it's all revealed. And that simple thing is a metaphor for life and death. Only in magic can we do that with a piece of paper like that. And that's where you elevate something that's just an ordinary trick into a metaphor, and it becomes theatrical. So let me now share with you something else.
We just had a question.
Yeah.
What kind of paper are you using for your butterflies?
I use a very light tissue. I use a very light tissue because when you fan it, you have to be able to really let the wind manipulate it. And there's a real strong knack that you have to develop. My routine, I've laid it out in my PDF. As I said, I'll put the video up of it at a later date. But it's just very simple, light tissue, just tissue paper. And that's because you need that fragility and you need the lightness and you need the shape too, that sort of cupped shape. It needs to have the center of gravity in the middle of the butterfly needs to be more than at the edges. That way it tends to float and you can fan it and then the weight will bring it down. And it's such an ancient trick. And the illusion of the butterfly is beautiful and it looks like a juggling skill. And when you get the PDF, of course, all the secret of it will be revealed. But it requires a lot of respect. And the reason is because it's a cultural piece and there's a lot of cultural appropriation out there. And in the past, magicians have really been guilty of it. You know, gaudy boxes painted with Chinese symbols, and they don't even know what they mean, and a million other things. And a lot of it was just because of the era that the magicians lived in at that time. But today we're a little more conscious. And so when I perform it in Japanese costume and character, but I do it to honor the culture. And I studied Kyogen theater, so I know how to walk in the Kyogen style. I try and make it as beautiful a piece of honoring of the effect as I can. And with that little bit of metaphor thrown in about life and death, I think it really makes it into a haiku-like performance. One other thing I do, which is related to the hand shadows, and this is an important point, you can do something in one act that you find has a relationship to another or has influence on it. So in my hand shadow act, I do a certain movement and I repeat it in the butterflies, because at the very beginning of the butterflies, I kneel by my table and assume this sort of meditative state, listen to the music, and then move my hands like this and be able to create the flower, let it bloom, and as after it blooms, and I put the invisible butterfly underneath the bowl where later it's going to come out and fly around. But that little pantomime makes the theater of it, makes the mood of it, and sets everything up. And that's one way that you see movement and something from another skill or technique carry over and associate with something fresh that you're working on. And that happens a lot if you spend enough time in the studio. These little moments rise up spontaneously and give you a little inspiration. And those little moments, it's the accumulation of little moments that eventually become a full act or a full routine. A cumulative effect is what Tony Montanaro would call it, the accumulative effect of something. We don't always need a linear plot, a linear story that goes straight, boom. Sometimes it's like enough of this color and a little bit of that color. It's more like an impressionist painting. You give a bunch of ideas here on this, something like that. It's not necessarily linear, but all of a sudden you get the whole impression that it's, oh, that's New York City, or whatever it is. So I think we should be more impressionist with our performance, I think. It doesn't always have to be so hard and linear, and that, especially for dramatic performances. The comic world is a whole other animal. Let's see. Did I give you the video for Wally yet? Did I or not?
Wally, no.
Oh, okay. I'll have to do that. I'll have to send it to you. So I'll send it to you while we play a little bit on fishing, if you don't mind. Would that be all right? Okay.
Fishing.
All right. Very good.
Please welcome Leland Faulkner.
In the spring, it is a tradition that the true fisherman sets out in search of the perfect river. Months of planning and research have provided our master outdoorsman with the exact location of a secret water world known only to him. Pay close attention to his razor-sharp senses as we join him on this special journey into the rough and tumble of the rugged wilderness.
Oh, your sound, Leland.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
All right. That routine is the culmination of so very much. Years of literally touring with fish taught me a lot. The aerial fishing, when I first came across it, I thought, that's perfect for this play, this children's theater play that I'm going to be showcasing. And I worked on it, I developed it based on the classic secret that I gleaned from the Albo books on Aikido. Now, I couldn't find the equipment, which was a very special rod. And I ended up making my own. Years later, I was able to find a beautifully made rod. And then at that time, I was also very poor. And I sold it to Ray Goulet, who put it in his museum. And then a year later, I wanted to get it back, and he wouldn't sell it to me. Once something went into Ray's museum, it stayed there. And every time I'd go to his museum, I would look at that thing and go, there you are. Well, finally, I was able to get another one. And I toured with that in our play, Urashimataro. We showcased at the Kennedy Center. And I was booked for 2 years on a national tour, coast to coast, touring that Japanese-themed children's play. And Urashimataro is the story of a fisherman. And it would begin with me in silhouette, with the fishing rod and the little box. And I would come out and I would catch the first fish. And I had a big round bowl that was lit up from underneath. And when I dropped the first fish in, you could hear the ripple go through the audience. Oh, is it real? Is it real? And then I caught 2 more fish. And then instead of a third fish, I caught a Japanese kite fish. They're called koinobori. And it would be about this long. It was essentially, I had it palmed and it looked like I was just putting a little piece of bait on the end of the hook. And I would swing it out, and it had a little paper strip around it. And it would snap open when it was at the peak over the audience's head. Confetti would come flying out, and I would have this fish, this kite fish, on the end of my fishing pole, and I would hand it off to an assistant, and I would steal a flagstaff with an even bigger kite off of their back. And as soon as they left, produce that one, and then another assistant would come on, take that one from me. I would steal a third one, like this, and this assistant would stay. Second assistant would take this one, and I would reach behind me into the box I had brought on, and I had the biggest kite of all in that box, and I would produce the flagstaff. And aerial fishing became a lead-in for the spectacular production number. And of course, there was dance involved, choreography with movement, and it successfully toured, national tour for 2 years because of aerial fishing. Now, I have to tell you something. Touring with fish, not all it's cracked up to be. Billy McComb wrote about that in his book. He said, fish, they're not cuddly like rabbits. And when you tour with them, like I did, we had to have a special bucket with an aerator in the top. It had to be 12 volts so we could plug it into the at that time, the car lighter outlet. And so the fish would stay alive and fresh. And we were actually touring with an aquarium, essentially. And we'd get into a hotel room, and I'd fill the tub up with water. I had a special stopper for the bathtubs. And I would do pH and make the water just right, put the fish, and they'd have a beautiful home for the night. And I remember Ray Goulet came in, and he was just astounded to see fish in my tub. He goes, "You're crazy." I guess I was a little bit. Once we were invited to stay at a host's hotel, very wealthy family. They had this beautiful home in Massachusetts, Newton, Mass. Beautiful home. And we were in the guest room, this guest area, I should say. And I did this whole thing with the bathtub, and one of my fish wasn't feeling well. I could see that it had a little ick. So I had this stuff called jungle green to get rid of the ick on their scales. And I put it in the water, and whoosh, the whole bathtub turned green. Of course, I had to fess up to our host. I felt about 2 inches tall. It turned out that they had restored the tub by using an acid wash on it that had taken the porcelain finish off. And the moment I put that chemical in there, it just permeated the whole thing. I was never so ashamed in my life. But this is what happens when you tour with something that's non-pareil. It's not a dove, it's not a rabbit, it's fish. It takes special precautions, things you have to do, very complex. I've had fish, I had a fish jump out of a bucket. I've had them tip over. I had an open-bodied van that we were touring in. I had one go into the body of the van, never to come out again. And for a week, yes, you know what happened. For a week. So now, I no longer perform aerial fishing with live fish. No, the solution for me is much different. And I'll show you a little bit about the equipment and the way that I put things together. I'll break it down for you a little bit. The sketch that you just saw, in fact, when that was recorded, I was still hobbling. I was fresh off of dual knee replacement surgery. And I was in such pain, and I was so anguished, and I thought that my career was over. And to battle that whole idea, I said, I'm going to create something. And I started working on this idea for aerial fishing and to do this more of a modern fisherman, more of an LL Bean type character. I do live here in Maine. And I took that LL Bean idea and I ran with it. And there's a beautiful Russian prop maker who makes the giant fish. And I got him to make me a couple of fish, and they are beautifully made. Ilya is a fantastic artist, and you should always order directly from the creator, even though it takes time. It takes time to get it shipped, from overseas. It's well worth it if it's something that you need. For me, it was the perfect ending and the perfect finish. Let me explain a little bit to you about how I put the thing together. Several props were important for me. One of them being this beautiful table, this beautiful appearing table, and that is the table that holds the bowl. Now you have to gear up quite a bit for this act. For example, I had to make a special vest. And the vest is very important because it hides the table, among other things, but also it gives me a certain character, and that's important to me. And plus you have all these things and all these gimcracks on here. That's part of the character as well. The other thing is the hat. Now the hat's important, and there's some new bits of business. As you work on a piece, especially a piece like this, which is more of a pantomime comedy, a physical comedy, things occur to you all the time that you end up incorporating as the thing develops and grows. But the hat was important, not the least because it adds so much character. A costume can really define who you are. Chaplin discovered his whole tramp by putting on the baggy pants and the tight jacket and the little bowler hat. And his character was born. So a costume can really feed the who in your act. Here again, Let me just grab this. I use a classic fishing creel. Classic fishing creel. For our purposes here today, I use a camp stool to make sure that everything can be seen. So it'll be elevated up off the ground a little bit. And when the creel is first brought to your attention, it's ostensibly get the sandwich out of it. So all focus goes on the sandwich, not on the load that's in the paper bag. And then, of course, this draws the fly. And then the fly is very persistent. And as I'm doing that, I have the little bug inside the hat, so I can steal it away. This is the splat. And so I shake it like this, and then so I have a little magnet here, I have a magnet in the hat, and this is essentially nothing more than a piece of iron-on fabric, a little bit of feather, all put around a magnet. So now I can handle and manipulate this little tiny thing, but it adds so much, that little moment, and creates such logic later in the story, the little pantomime, the story of the pantomime, when I take my prized lure that I had just freshly caught and use it to catch the big fish. Now, the hat's important. The other thing that's important, of course, is the pole itself. The pole is a very small little fishing pole. And here's the thing about that. That's misdirection for the bowl. And that's how the production of the bowl is done. It's classic. I have a little rubber cover, or in these days, a silicone cover. I have a little loop on the bowl. When I lift my hat up as I'm taking out the fishing pole, the bowl comes with it. And now the table that was produced earlier becomes the perfect stand for the act. And everything is self-contained. I can walk on with the whole act. That's an important thing. I like that. I like being able to walk on and be self-contained and not have to go here, go there, make my own little world with me. Then the other thing that's important is the actual way you handle the fishing line. I use it almost like a gypsy thread, if you know how the gypsy thread is done. But instead of looping things over so many times, I just do a little simple wrap like this. And of course, I have a magnet in the end, and I have a magnet with opposite polarity in the end of the fishing pole. And so now everything is self-contained there on the end. And at the appropriate moment, I can just flick the pole and the whole thing unwinds. That's important because you need that clean moment of little accent points, and ding, and it adds a little comic quality too. Now I reach in here and I take out a bait, but I don't just take out the bait. I take out one of the real secrets of this routine at the same time. Ow. What I do is I actually take out a robotic fish, a robo-fish. And now we do the classic, the bait. And that's just a little piece of silk that's rolled up into a tube. And I take it here and I take the whole piece off, but I make it look like it's still connected. But I've switched now the bait for the robotic fish. And when the fish hits the water, it swims around. It has a little sensor built in. And the sensor actually senses the water and makes it wiggle its tail and swim around. Now there's some extra bits. I have yet another fish in a tiny little holder here. And this holder is just a piece of flat metal with a spring attached to it. And it just holds the fish enough. That way, when I turn profile, I can steal the fish from here and put another bait on, catch that just like I did before. And now I've got the stolen fish. I can drop that one in as well. And now I'm pretty well clean. But recently I've come across some ideas that I like a lot. And just a little bit of business. And it makes the kids laugh, and it gives a little bit more space of time. And then, of course, at the finish, you just go for the paper bag, connecting the magnet, and you get your production fish for the finish. But the idea is that all of this accumulates into a sketch, a story that has a little arc. And that arc is what's so key. Finding that arc in a piece gives you something literally to hang your hat on. And that's when the opportunities rise up and inspire you to make something fresh and new. Even if it's something that's been around for 200 years, you can find something new and fresh in it. Sort of like I have with this fishing act. So 2 days ago on Zoomcast, when I performed this, it was really well received. I was told that people felt like they were watching Sesame Street, which I take as a compliment. I have a lot of friends that work on Sesame Street, and there's a reason why it's so successful and why that educational element is so important. In this time of pandemic, of course, you can tie in a lot of your work. For example, getting out into nature, and nature in general is very healing and therapeutic, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can use these current themes to make your work relevant, and you should. You should take every opportunity you can. Oh, I should mention one other thing. This bowl, as you see, lights up. This is just technical information. But at first I thought I'd just get one of those puck lights, and glue it on. But the puck light on a stage for 500 people, it didn't give enough wattage. As you can see, this is incredibly bright, very bright. This must be about 100 watts or 100 lumens, but it's no heat, it's all LED. And essentially I gutted a magnetic shop light from Home Depot. I gutted it and made my own little case for it, glued it on, and put a micro switch on it. And that way, at the moment of production, it has that little extra pop of light and color. And that's the fishing. I hope you all got a little something out of fishing. And oh, did you get my link, Joel, for Wally?
I did. Quick question though.
Can we put that up, and then we'll talk a little bit more about building the comedy routine.
Absolutely, coming right up.
Great.
farsightedness. This pair is for farsightedness. And this is the pair I use to look for all the others. Holy moly. Just was trying to wipe my glasses a little. Wait a minute. That's not right. What the heck? We need to thank a few people, like our technical crew who has been so helpful to us all. Like our technical crew who has been so helpful to us.
And there you have it. I really enjoyed putting that character together. I really enjoyed putting that character together, and it came about again because I went and I bought a white suit off the rack, and I saw myself in the mirror in this white suit, and I went, "Oh, him!" And I found some buck teeth and the black glasses, and that whole bit was born, I would say, that moment. But yes, it takes a lot of development to come up with some of the ideas. It takes messing around in the studio for hours, it feels like, to finally come up with the what appeared to be simple once it was done idea of using the microphone cable for the Professor Cheers trick, and using the microphone cable to show the ineptitude of the character, where everything goes wrong and accumulates in terms of things going wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong. But at the same time, there's quite a bit of hidden technique in there. Manipulation, sleeving with the glasses, and so much else. And I'm always finding new little bits and new little things to do. Here's something that everybody can do. Get yourself a pair of glasses and you can learn how to do the spin. The spin. Now, the spin's great, but this is even better. Now, that uses a simple card technique applied to glasses. And I've been messing around a lot with glasses these days. And what's great is that the grip that I've come up with to be able to back palm a pair of glasses is really secure. And here's how it works. You take your knuckle, you put it between the glasses frame and the actual armature like this. So now you're holding it essentially like this, right? And it looks like you're just like holding the pair of glasses in a kind of a normal way. In the meantime, you've got your silk palmed in your finger palm. And when you do this, you're going to go like this to this position here at the same time as you release the silk. So you're here, and it looks pretty clean. So I hope you like that. You can work on that at your own leisure. And that's the thing. People need a little more discipline, and they also need to start looking at things other than the ordinary objects that all magicians play with, you know, balls and coins. And I mean, glasses are ubiquitous. They are everywhere. People handle them every day. They know what they are. And so I've developed quite a bit of routing and a routine around eyeglasses. And I'll be releasing a little pamphlet on that soon. I'm still in the writing stages of it. And a little more research and development, but it's going to be quite a good little routine. I can't wait to show it to you. It's called optometry. And when it's ready, I'll be revealing it to the world, maybe on Zoom for all we know. Let's see, I have a few other things to share with you and talk with you about. But first, maybe we should open it up to a little discussion.
Sure.
Would you like to, I'll take a couple of questions.
One question just came in from Lou. What does one do to start working on individual eye control that you demonstrated?
Individual eye control?
Yes.
As in my eyes?
Yes.
Like this, you mean?
Yes, like that.
It's like you're a chameleon. Well, it may look like I'm moving both eyes, but I am indeed only moving one. The first thing to do is you learn how to cross your eyes. When you've crossed your eyes, then you slowly look to one side, and then you come back to having crossed eyes. And once you master that, then you can start sort of getting the circular thing going. My mentor, Tony Montanaro, used to be able to twirl his eyes in a circle so fast it would make you dizzy to look at him. So essentially, once again, I'll explain this to you. This is so silly, but here we go. Cross your eyes. You look to the left, look back to the center, crossed eyes. Huh? Now, look all around. There you go. You know, we work a lot with gesture and learning how to control facial expressions and the degree of facial expressions. And as mimes, we analyze a lot of this stuff in much more detail than other kinds of performers, I'm sure of it. But we also have a lot of techniques that we have gleaned from the masters over the years. In magic, one of the things is surprise. And there's a little rule about surprise. The more surprised you are, the farther away you move from the source of the surprise. Makes sense? So if it's just a little surprise, oh, right? But if it's a big surprise, oh. And if it's really big, it'll move you off your feet, right? So depending on you decide what the level of surprise is, the level of reaction is, and then that transmits to the audience how they're supposed to feel, right? How surprised they're supposed to feel. Once again, the more surprised or shocked you are by something, depending on the intensity of it, you gauge your reaction accordingly. And that's one of so many different little simple applications of mime technique. Mime technique isn't all about what we call the fixed points and illusion pantomime. A lot of it is conceptual. But I think this is a good point and a good place to talk about mime technique, since the subject's just been crossed, and all about movement, and everything from a simple, finger ripple and learning how to master that gives you an intelligent pair of fingers, intelligent pair of hands. Mastering movement technique so that you can create the wing movement that we need so much, or to create the idea of water or a pantomime of a river. Having these movements in your repertoire, they just come up automatically when you need them, but they won't be in the bank account unless you've been saving it up. Do you understand? Unless you've been researching it, developing it, and putting it in your body. Now, Tony's wall technique was based on what we call the fixed point. A point in space is where two lines intersect. If you could imagine that point like in front of you here, you can put your fingertip on it. I mean, you can try this right now as we're talking. And you try to keep your fingertip as still as possible. So if you move away from it, your fingertip doesn't move. No matter where you go, your fingertip would stay fixed in that point. Would stay fixed in that point. It can be, you can put the point anywhere you want. You can put it here, you can put it there, wherever you choose. This is the lean, all based on this fixed point. Tony used to do a wonderful little gag in his warm-up. He would do this. And he would lean on that cane, that stick like this. Then he would grab hold of an imaginary strap up here and let go of the point down there. And then he'd put his arm up here and let go of the point there. You see, it was all the same attitude. It was just this line with the body, right? So this fixed point established that first. Now the line says, oh, my weight's over here. Oh, my weight is now over there. So it's understanding those things that could let you show, for example, that that something had some mass to it when it really doesn't. It can let you show that things are light. If you're doing a gypsy balloon, say, and you want that balloon to keep rising, you can put a little bit of it into your body. It's just simple, subtle things that movement adds the theatrical element, a dreamlike element. And that's what audiences want. They want to see the actors transform. They want to see the dream come alive. They're waiting to see the transformation. They're hoping you'll change in front of them. They hope you get, that you have feelings, that they can see you become, angry or become scared or become this or become that. They want to see that commitment happen within your whole body. So it's not just your mind working, it's your whole body, which means your whole soul, mind, body, and heart working simultaneously. Let me take a few more questions now.
Sure. One person wrote, do you choose the effects based on the character, or do you adapt the character based on the tricks?
A little bit of both. Depends on how it happens. All the Wally things came character first. I had the character. I said, well, what is this character all about? He's about his ineptitude. He's about things going wrong. But he's a wannabe. He's trying to be a great entertainer, but things get in his way. He's trying to be the congenial host, but the microphone gives him problems. He's trying to be handsome, but he's got buck teeth. That was the whole sort of thing, is that he's trying hard, but things are getting in his way. In a way, he's sort of cursed. And that's a horrible thing about comedy, is when somebody's in trouble, that's when it's funny. Isn't that awful? So yeah, character can come first. But sometimes, I get the aerial fishing really was inspired by the props, and having been familiar with the effect for so long, that when I came up with, thought, well, why can't I do it as a modern fisherman? And I was laid up, and I got online and I ordered the creel, the same creel that I use today. And I found a fish bowl that fit inside, and I fiberglassed the inside of it, and then layered it with some black foam fabric, and it became sort of a passion project to build the props themselves and to make the props work and to find the right ones that work, the right size bowl, how to light it up. All those things, they didn't happen instantaneously. They accumulated over time. And then in the process, I started conceptualizing, saying, well, you want to start off small, and you want to build to something bigger and bigger, and you want to have little bits of action in between. And so I would do what I call carding. I break an act into beats using cards. Write your title on the first card. First action, first beat on the next card, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you can lay them all out, and you can see your whole act and all the ideas, where they belong. You can juxtapose. Cards are great because you can just slide them around. And there's something tangible about having real cards in your hand as opposed to doing it on a computer using digital notes. Tangible cards there's something special about them. I first started using this technique of codifying instead of scripting, especially in the development stage, because your script happens usually after the piece is complete. But in the process, the creative process, the cards for me make the most sense. I can take the beat, I can see the whole act laid out. I can raise and lower the cards depending on where the action is going. I can lay it out on a table or the floor, and I can see the actual sort of algorithm of how the whole sketch plays. And that's a great thing. It lets you encapsulate everything. And then when you've broken your whole act down into beats, of course, these are very flexible and you can change content, but you have a record, a tangible record of your act. So maybe you don't do it for a month. You can go back to your notes, your cards, you can pull it out and go, oh yeah, that beat, that moment. That's right, I gotta do that, gotta do that. And you can lay them out on the floor, you go through your act, and that's right. So they're indispensable when I work. And I developed this idea when working on a film and creating shot lists and using index cards for the shot list. Once you've done the shot, we would just toss the card. But I found it was such a great shorthand for developing and devising. Devising is the word that all the theater people use these days for creating sketches. They devise theater. So we're devisers. We devise using these cards, at least I do. And it's been really effective, really effective. So I highly recommend doing that. If you work with me and I offer directing sessions, I work with people one-on-one, or if it's an ensemble, I work with the group. And we break everything down and we use the carding system. And at the end of the session, I give them both the physical cards and a digital version of the cards. And then they have all the notes, all the details that we create over, say, a week or 2 weeks, all the little nuances that have gone into elevating and improving what they do. And that's what's really missing in a lot of performers' lives. There is no vaudeville anymore. There's no place for people to go out and fail. You're supposed to, show up, and all of a sudden, you're complete. Your act is complete, and it's, you're a god. It doesn't work that way. For the most part, things come hard-earned, and over time, they accumulate. and then become something special because of the effort and the sweat equity that you've put into it. So the cards, don't forget that. And don't forget, directing sessions. You can hire me. Go ahead. I'll take another question.
Well, Anthony Darkstone made a comment. Dear Eugene always stated, all magic is theater, and Leland is a superb example of that statement.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Darkstone. That's wonderful. Thank you. That's a real compliment. Appreciate that. Yeah, I knew Eugene Berger. He was a wonderful guy. Very, very, very talented man. What a voice. So you combine the voice and the beard. I don't know, you had some sort of archetype there, and he certainly played upon it. Any other questions?
Just about the lecture notes. Does that have has a fishing routine and the butterflies?
I have the butterflies as a PDF. I have the aerial fishing broken down and the history of it. It's mostly about the history, and then I have all the beats broken down of my act in it. There are all those little things I've been adding, though, of course, like the little flat rubber fish. And I should mention that about that flat rubber fish. You can buy a rubber fish, you know, but when you buy the rubber fish, it's three-dimensional and it doesn't move very well. It's kind of stiff. But if you cut it in half and then paint the other side to match, like I've done here with some acrylic paint, you get fantastic movement out of it just by like you know, it's sort of like Robbie the Raccoon, you know, that whole thing. And eventually I'm going to do the whole bit. It's going to go down the back of my shirt, and I'll be screaming and yelling and grabbing it and pulling it out of my pants, and finally getting it back in, and I'll come back up and then do the whole slapping thing. And but the idea is the movement. Because it's so flexible, if you wiggle it just a little bit like this, it really comes alive, and it becomes much more alive than I ever thought it would. Yeah, so, etc.
Fantastic.
Flat fish. Nothing to it. Anybody have any other questions before we try any last bits?
The lecture notes are in a PDF form?
They're in PDF form. It's much cheaper that way for everybody. I have pandemic prices on it. $10 a piece or 2 for 15. And when you order it, you get freebies. You'll get my full lecture notes here, which break down theatrical magic as I see it. And also, I'll include a copy of The Writer's Journey. Now, it's a simple PDF, but originally The Writer's Journey was just a series of loose leaf papers that were circulating around Hollywood. And it contained ideas about using Joseph Campbell's ideas about archetypes and mythic structure as plot elements for movies. It became like an underground sensation. Everyone's, have you seen it? Oh, have you got a copy of it? I've got a copy. Do you have a copy of it? And it actually became one of the working methods for building the plot structure for Star Wars and the whole series of films and that whole universe. And of course, now the whole Marvel universe also has all those classic elements in. I mean, they even bring up some of the classic gods and heroes, you know, the Thor and all of that. It's almost direct lifting of mythologies. And but essentially, that book teaches you how archetypes and character archetypes interact, how they move plot structure along, and how they make for a sense of completion at the end of a journey. And that's all about the journey, all about the arc of an act, the arc of a film, the arc of a story. And it's indispensable, and everyone should read it. Anyone who's a performer needs to read a copy of it. and you'll be enlightened if you've never read it before. And that's what I'm going to send you.
Fantastic. Wow.
You can email me, by the way, at lelandfaulkner.com, and that's how you can communicate with me. And I'll get things out to you directly. But my PayPal is a different address. It's faulknerfilm@roadrunner.com. All right, so that was my little pitch.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, or should we take a look at one last thing here?
Yes, take a look at one last thing, then we'll go back. We have a couple more questions, but we'll take a look at one last thing.
Okay, let's take a look at the chapeau.
Chapeau it is.
And this is a highly edited version of the chapeau because it's a long piece, but I want to give you a taste for the flavor of it and what it's all about. If you've never seen a chapeau before, it's so simple, but so entertaining.
All the way from Portland, Maine, please welcome to the stage, Leland Faulkner.
Just before Christmas, I went up into the attic of our old house. When I turned on the light, I saw an old hat box. But when I opened up the box, all it contained was an old hat brim. But as I held the hat brim, I began to dream.
Dominique et Nick s'en allaient tout simplement.
M-I-C-K-E-Y-M-O-U-S-E.
Just a circle of felt. Just a circle of felt. And that circle of felt sat in my little magic room on a shelf for over a decade. I knew there was something in it. I knew there was something there. I love the idea of changing characters. I gave you the link for Felicia and Truly. And I'm going to have you play it in just a second, but I want to say, I was so looking forward to seeing this. He was such a famous historical entertainer, Felician Truy, famous hand shadow artist and famous for chapography. And when I finally found his film by the Lumiere brothers, it was wonderful to see, but I was just a little disappointed because I felt there wasn't enough there. If you could do me a favor and just play that clip of Truy, I would appreciate it. And everyone will understand what I mean.
Was that the Auguste and Louis Lumiere?
Yeah, that would be Lumiere. Yeah.
Okay. Coming right.
Oh, yeah. And there he is. And as you can see, he's doing all the hat folds. He's doing them very quickly. And you have no time to appreciate the world that each fold could possibly be. So I saw that and I said to myself, there's more to this than that. Has to be. And then it hit me. It wasn't the hat folds. It wasn't the folds that were the key. It was the little dreams, the little vignettes that came out of it. That's what made the things important. That's what made the folds important. Otherwise, there was no meat, at least for me. I think one of my favorite folds is this one here. And I'll explain a little bit why it's my favorite. You see, I was raised as a good Catholic boy. And so when the chance to parody the Monsignor raised its head, I was all over it. So I got this little Monsignor's hat, and I was able to create a little pantomime. I'll do it for you. It goes a little bit like this. It goes like this.
Wow. Bravo.
All with just a little ring of felt, but it's finding literally something to hang your hat on, to tell that little plot story, that little archetype, make it come to life, not just symbolize it, but make it live. For me, that's what really makes the chapeau special. By the way, so much of what I do, like the hand shadows and fishing and that sort of thing, I can perform internationally, and I have. I performed, in 4,000 seat Russian circuses. But the chapeau is one of those things that not every culture understands. I couldn't perform it in China. I could perform it in France, they'd understand it. I could perform it in Europe, they'd understand it. But a lot of the figures and characters are idiosyncratic to the certain cultures. And so you always have to be aware of that when you're performing, and pick your material accordingly, especially if you perform internationally, like I have. So that's one of those things. It's not going to work, if I take it to certain countries. So I have to constantly be aware of that. Even though I love it and it's one of my favorite pieces to do, there are places and times, as Al Quran would say, horses for courses. Any questions? I know you had a few questions in the back there.
So one question was, did you teach yourself shadowography? And to add to that, did you teach yourself the chapeauography as well?
Well, yes, and yes. yes, and yes. But I got to talk about the inspirations. What makes you passionate about something? What is it that piques the spark that makes you want to commit to learning something that can be pretty daunting when you first start, and looks like something maybe you'll never master. When I was a little boy and I came to the States for the first time, I'd never seen television. And so at the ripe old age of 11, I got to see the Ed Sullivan Show for the first time. And on the Ed Sullivan Show was this Israeli hand shadow artist, Albert Almoznino. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I just couldn't believe it. And it was impressed in my memory. And years later, I was doing some research in Rhode Island. They have an incredible magic library. It's a very special collection. You have to show that you're a member of a magic society, et cetera, even to get in and do research to see some of these antique books that are held there in the collection. And I got access, and it was like, there's all this information on shadows. And so Tony, my mentor, gave me a shot and let me start performing a few shadows at the top of the show. And I started to get my first reactions. And then I started growing the repertoire of things that I could do. I learned how to make the animals have eyes, for example, and giving them eyes that move gives them just a little bit of life. If you can give movement to like the camel chewing, it gives it that little element of life that otherwise it's just a form. One day I was on tour doing Urash Mataro. We were going coast to coast. And I stopped in to Magic Inc. and saw Jay Marshall. And I handed Jay my poster, which was a little poster of me doing hand shadows. And he goes, "You do hand shadows, kid?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Show me what you got." So I went out to my car and I got my light and went in his little back room there at Magic Inc. And I did my act for him. And he goes, "Stay right here, kid." I'm sitting in this kind of nasty couch in this little back room and sitting there and waiting, and time goes by. But, finally, Jay shows up. He has a stack of books this high. And he goes, "Here, kid, look at these." I went, "Oh my God." It's like every every book on hand shadows that I'd ever seen and some that I had never seen. They were all there. I said, that's amazing, Jay. I can't read all these right now. He says, you can take them overnight. Bring them back tomorrow. Holy moly. I spent the next 6 hours at Kinko's. In those days, we didn't have cell phones. We couldn't just snap photos or anything like that. And of course, I was already stunned that he had let me walk out with some of the pamphlets, where the paper was so fragile and so old from the 1800s. I was just blown away. And at that moment, Jay was a bit like a Merlin to me for opening up that gate. And after Jay saw me do my hand shadow act, he invited me to perform at various magic collectors gatherings in Chicago. And then, of course, some other doors opened up. So Jay did me a huge service and a huge favor. And Jay also had that legacy of having been on the Ed Sullivan Show more times than any other artist. So many great Jay Marshall stories. But for me, he was very much a Merlin, very much a Merlin. And one of the most hilarious guys I've ever had the pleasure to meet. Anyway, I was digressing there a little bit, but yes, I learned shadows on my own, and then with the help of people like Jay, who opened up all of this history to me. And I really am indebted to those people, always will be.
We had a question from Glenn Mackin. Can you adapt your act to vary in different time slots? And if so, how do you decide what to sacrifice and still keep the essence of the act?
Whew. Well, different time slots. I'm not sure exactly what he means by different time slots. 1 a.m., 7 a.m.
No, I think amount of time. Like if you have like a.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, I understand now. Absolutely. One of the things that I always try to do is when I develop an act, once it's timed out, I know that time exactly. I can do the shadows in 6 minutes. I can do the shadows in 7.5 minutes. I had a specific time for the butterflies that was 6 minutes, 45 seconds, almost 7 minutes. So everything is timed out. But most importantly, everything has its own case. Each act has its own case. So I can pack everything and if I need duplicates for other things, I get duplicates, but every act has its own case. So I can just pick it up and go and know everything I have is in that case. So if I know I want to do fishing, for example, I can grab that box. If I want to do butterflies, I can grab that box. I have a standard trunk, which is boxes within boxes. And my paper folder act is in one box. My butterflies are in one box. The fishing is in one box. Everything has its category and is organized that way. So because I know the time, and if I know my audience, I can pick and choose from the repertoire that way. I hope that answers your question. I think finding cases, specific cases that really work for a given act or routine is really important. Yeah.
Richard Hatch had a question. Do you offer workshops for magicians at the Celebration Barn?
I have tried, but it hasn't happened. I was going to offer one with Bob Fitch, but it hasn't happened yet. But I'm still twisting their arm. I used to own Celebration Barn. I used to be the owner, and I carried on Tony Montanero's legacy. And I'm the guy who opened up Celebration Barn to other master teachers and other disciplines other than mime. Because I think performers, which we all are, we're not just magicians, you have to be actors, you have to be mimes, you have to be, if you can sing, you want to incorporate your ability to sing. Paul Draper is a good example of that. If you want to, if you want to be a performing artist, you have to have a range of abilities. It's better to be a triple threat than just a single. You understand? So Celebration Barn offers that, and the workshops at the barn are quite varied. They go everywhere from improvisational workshops with Keith Johnstone. They go all the way to Commedia dell'arte with Italian comedy masters. They cover neutral mask work from the Jacques Lecoq School of Mime. Clowning with Avner, the eccentric Avner Eisenberg, my good friend. Yeah, but magic specifically hasn't been on the agenda at Celebration Barn, although I would like to change that. But it's not specifically magic, as I said. We are variety artists, and much of what I do, for example, is what they call allied art, shadow play and chapography, and things like fishing. Though, they cross the line. They're like this hybrid, and I think this eclecticism really is the way things are going in the theater world these days. And part of the reason is people are looking for something fresh, and the way to do it is by planting, by putting two different seeds together and see what grows. So there are no workshops at the barn, but I offer private workshops. And maybe Bob Fitch and I will be able to offer something down the line. We'll see.
Well, Damien and Billy Damon say hello.
Hi, guys. Good to see you.
And can you just go over your lecture note? I mean, what you have available? And
yes, the PDFs, as I said, break down into, they're $10 a piece, $15 if you get two. And if you order two, you'll get all the lecture notes for free as part of the package, and you'll get a copy of The Writer's Journey in a PDF form. And that's a pretty darn good pandemic price. So $15 and you're good to go. Other than that, you can contact me, for the private workshop part of it. The PDFs are A Flight of Butterflies, which is broken down. And of course, if you have questions or anything, you can always email me and we can discuss the details of how you actually make these things happen and come to life. And then aerial fishing and the history of that. And I mean, they have built so many gimmicks for fish. It's almost unbelievable over the years. But you rarely see anything like aerial fishing simply because it's usually hard to travel and perform with live fish. But as you saw today, we've obviated that important element. So no phone calls from PETA or protests or any issues on that level anymore.
wow. So, Leland, I got to tell you, thank you, because you just saved me from this giant bowl.
Yeah.
But listen, on behalf of everybody throughout the world, I just got to say thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
This has been amazing. I mean, people, you got to realize something. So Leland and all the lecturers here are donating their time because they're elevating the art here, period. They're making you, the best magician that you want to be. So thank you. Thank you so much, Leland.
You're so welcome.
Appreciate it.
It's been a real pleasure. So glad to have been here. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Take it easy. Thank you.
Bye-bye.